Ivy here. On my main project, I've been hitting kind of a lot of roadblocks trying to get a hold of supplies. So I decided to set aside my main project and do something that I thought would be like kind of quick and fun and also really fun for the season. Personally, I'm not really feeling ready to let go of fall just yet, so I'm going to take advantage of the last few weeks of fall scenery, and I'm going to make a straw witch's hat that's sort of inspired by like a scarecrow type of idea. My initial plan in making this straw hat was just to buy a couple of straw hats on the internet and then try and MacGyver something and turn the brim of one hat into the crown of the other hat, if that makes sense. But when I got the two hats in the mail, which are these, as much as I love the color, I do think that this style of straw tends to look really beachy pretty much no matter what you do to it, and I wanted something that was going to be more versatile than this. So this is the straw that I found that I want to work with. It was a little bit expensive. It's about $7 or $8 per foot, so that ends up coming out to like $25 a yard, and you do need a whole yard of it, I think. This is what's called caning, and it's sold in furniture making stores, so like certain woodworking stores will have things like this. It comes in modern style caning open weave, which is what this is, and it also comes in like a more traditional furniture style weave, which actually is what is in this privacy screen right here. Now, I had some traditional caning left over from this project, but the more I looked at it, the more I realized that it kind of just looks like what it is, which is furniture caning. So I'm really excited to work with the modern open weave caning, and I think it's going to end up working out really well. So without any further introduction, let's get started. I've definitely made quite a few witch hats in my time, so the process is pretty familiar to me. So I'll go ahead and walk you through how to draft a crown, which is the pointy part, and the brim in the easiest way possible. Now, there definitely do exist like fancy calculators on the internet in order to find all of the different numbers that you need in order to draft a cone from scratch. But personally, I find that the easiest way to do this is actually to use the string trick. So we're gonna start by drafting the crown. You'll need a big piece of paper, a ball of string, a Sharpie, and some tape in order to do this technique. Step one is to tie your marker to one end of your string. Step two is to measure from your marker up to how tall you want the crown of your hat to be. The next step is to anchor the string at exactly the point where you want the tip of your crown to be. I'm gonna also go ahead and use my marker to put a little dot right there in case there's any slipping or sliding when I'm working on my crown. From here, all you have to do is try and keep the marker perfectly straight up and down and swing it across using a pendulum motion. Now, this is definitely way more of a circle than we're going to end up needing, but it's always good to overshoot the mark so that you have a little left over in case you need it. The next step is to measure the circumference of your head. My head happens to be 22 inches around, so I'm going to mark a random place on the circle. It doesn't really matter where. And then I'm going to use my soft tape measure to mark out 22 inches. You can go ahead and remove your string as long as you have a dot at the place where it starts, and then use a ruler or a yardstick to connect each of the dots. Now, this cone shape is almost perfect. The only thing that it's missing is seam allowance. So I'm going to add a ½ inch of seam allowance to both of these before I cut out the piece. Unfortunately, in order to draft the brim, you do need to do some actual real math. But fortunately, the internet is more than happy to do it for you. This is just a simple circle calculator that I found by Googling it, and the measurement that you're looking for is the radius so that you know how long to make the next piece of string. So all you need to do is put in the circumference of your head, so that's the distance all the way around your head. Mine happens to be 22 inches, and you hit calculate, and it does the measurements for you. So radius is equal to 3.5 inches. So we need a piece of string that is 3.5 inches long. I guess my camera wasn't rolling, but I just did the same circle trick with the string, and I did it on a slightly longer piece of string in order to actually form the brim of the hat. I think I added about 4 inches. It's supposed to be a sun hat, so I wanted the brim to be fairly wide. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut out these two pieces. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, you actually want to add a seam allowance to this inner circle as well, because it's eventually going to get attached to the crown, and you'll need a little bit of extra in order to be able to do that effectively. So after I drafted those two pattern pieces, I took a second and ironed this caning with steam. It was pretty tightly rolled up, so it kept kind of wanting to unroll and be a little inconvenient in that way. So the next step then is, of course, to cut our pieces out. I'm a little bit nervous about working with this fabric, which is obviously not really fabric because I've never worked with anything like this before, and my instinct is that it's going to fall apart. So if that's the case, I will let you know, and you can avoid making the same mistakes that I make. All right, sorry for the time warp. I got kind of busy with other stuff, so I'm picking up on a new day. As I was looking at this off camera, waiting to have time to actually sit down and really work on it, I tried to sew this little sample piece together the same way I would sew this piece together. So essentially just like to overlap the edges and then just stitch through the straw. And I was finding that what it wants to do is essentially like disintegrate, and you can see that the straw was just like coming out. I think that there's probably a way to do it without just essentially allowing it to disintegrate while you work on it. Unfortunately, I'm not patient enough to figure out what that might be. So I'm gonna go ahead and try out some hot glue on this little sample piece and see if that does the trick. Looks good, actually. Yeah. It's really not bad, I think. As I'm trying to kind of overlap these two edges, I am still a little bit concerned about the straw sort of just falling apart. You can see at the tip it actually already has. So I am going to see if I can do like a zigzag stitch or something along the edges. Maybe that'll keep it intact long enough to actually glue it together. All right, I think the zigzag actually did a pretty darn good job on this. I was initially tempted to go through with sewing it now that I know the zigzag actually works pretty well, but I think that I would have so much trouble trying to run the seam all the way up into this like really tight corner of the cone that it's probably not worth it. So I think I'm gonna stick with plan B, which was to glue it together. So here's hoping. Okay, so the next step from here, I think what I'm gonna do is clip into the seam allowance, because that's what you normally do when you make a witch hat. I think I'm gonna run a whole bunch of zigzags like around the actual center of the ring first, because I don't want it to start falling apart when I do that. Hey, shh, I'm filming. Technically. So I am going to clip through the seam allowance, and then I'm going to fold that seam allowance up and then just glue it to the inside of the cone. These are my 5th best pair of scissors. I might need to go get my 4th best pair of scissors. Had enough time to take a little bit of footage of the hat outside. Unfortunately, it was raining and the hat did not do super great in the rain. As you can probably see, it's definitely like taken on some weird shaping because it's gotten wet. and I don't think cane is really meant to get wet. Or, you know, just don't go out in the rain in your hat because it's not supposed to get wet. So don't do that. Sunny is just in the background eating his kibble like a T-Rex, just yeah, overall just like a really fun, quick project. I'm surprised at how smoothly this went. Normally I find that when I make things like this, they end up being a bigger mess than they really need to be, but I feel like start to finish, pretty much everything went smoothly. The only thing I would really for sure do differently next time is I wish I had left a bigger brim on the edges, because I really like this sort of like frayed look on the edges. And if I had left a little bit more kind of like seam allowance type brim, I could have done a more dramatic fray on the edges, but as it was, I didn't have enough brim to really do that. Other than that, I'm really happy with it, and I'm looking forward to wearing this in a lot of different sort of like fall themed outfits. I guess that's it. I guess that's all I had to say. I think that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.